started on time. And I don't know if all of you are aware, there's also a training going on in the room next door for the Kubernetes operator framework. So there'll be about 50 more people joining us after lunch. So we'll just get started in a minute. We'll give everybody a minute to get in here. And then we're going to rock and roll because we have a lot of content to go through today. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Diane Mueller. I'm the Director of Community Development for Red Hat for the cloud platform and very specifically for OpenShift and OKD, the open source side of this. And today you are at an OpenShift Commons gathering, which is our community that's built up around the OpenShift ecosystem. It constitutes contributors, users, service providers, hosts, the upstream project leads, all of whom you're going to hear from a little bit today. I really want to thank you for coming out. I know it was not a snow day here in London. That was a snowpocalypse or something that didn't happen, but it's happening in Canada where I'm from. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what Commons is and just give a little brief update on where we're at today on the open source side of things. And then some of my colleagues from my team, Brian Gracely, Mike Barrett, and Dan Walsh are going to give some technical updates on OpenShift 4.0, what's going on in the container world right now. And then we're going to start in on some case studies from OpenShift end users. And it's not going to be all about OpenShift. They're going to be talking about everything that they're doing with OpenShift and other bits and pieces that they're integrating into it. So it should be an interesting showcase. And then we're going to have some all of the sponsors who are out there in the foyer around where you're going to get all your meals and coffee breaks are going to all do 5-minute lightning talks. So try to get the marketing folks and the teams to talk in just 5-minute chunks will be a challenge, and switching back and forth, so bear with us. But it should be a fun day, and really today is about you connecting with your peers and getting these updates and mingling, and so we've made a lot of time for breaks, for lunch, and after today in the evening up on the very nice reception area, which also has a nice, beautiful view of the river. We're having a reception that's being sponsored by Atos and Microsoft. So we're very grateful for that. So as we've got pretty much, I think, everybody in the room that's coming, I'm just going to talk a little bit about Red Hat's perspective on open source, that it is indeed the source of all the innovation that happens at Red Hat and in your organizations. And in GitHub, there's over 1 million projects right now in GitHub, and there's a lot of Red Hatters working on tons of those. The project that I work on specifically is OpenShift and the OpenShift open source side of things, which is been renamed. So we're really all about today talking about how all of these open source projects and the communities around them are providing for collaboration and cross-community collaboration with all of these different upstream projects and helping you to make the connections between all of these projects and understand how they all interleave and are interwoven and are interdependent. And hopefully this will inspire you to contribute, to use these projects. And contribution isn't just about, adding a piece of code or even just documentation. Your feedback is essential to this process, so we're really hoping to get that. So a quick update. You may have noticed floating around the internets again this cute little panda. The cute little panda signifies a renaming and of OpenShift origin to OKD, which represents our changeover to being a Kubernetes distribution. We flipped from being a Ruby on Rails, MongoDB app platform as a service into something that was based on Kubernetes about 2.5 years ago, maybe 3 now. And we rebranded to represent that. The repos are still in the origin repo, so if you have scripts or anything that are dependent on that, we didn't change the name of the repo. So just so you know. So we're delivering OpenShift through OKD. It is our community Kubernetes distribution, and today is a community day. It's not about sales and marketing, though someone might hit on you and out there in the foyer as our sponsors or something, and that's quite okay. But we're really trying to talk to the aspect today of how all of these different projects feed into OpenShift and build out our product offerings, and that all of these things have interdependencies and projects and companies that are dependent on them that are also contributing back into OpenShift itself. And we are trying very hard to keep those lines of communications open. And that's really the goal of OpenShift Commons, is to be able to sync up, have you connect with your peers, and get connected to the people that you need to know today, some of the OpenShift engineers and product managers, some of the other customers who may be doing things similar to what you are planning to do or doing. I'm very much interested in having you tell your stories as opposed to me talk a lot. I'm actually tired of my own voice. I love to give away the podium. So there are now over 470 member organizations. Some of the, I think all of the folks who are sponsoring out there are members of that. There's a wonderful Slack channel and a mailing list and lots of SIGs that you can join up and come with it. So Commons really for us is a bit of a new community model, because in the past, a community manager was probably someone who was trying to corral you to give code contributions to my project. But we also view it really as a communications channel. And we do that by hosting events like today, where you actually get to physically be in the same room with each other. We host OpenShift Commons briefings, which are usually twice a week when I'm not traveling, and they're probably going to go to 3 times a week shortly as we bring in some of the OpenShift on OpenStack folks to do briefings. And they're a half-an-hour presentation with live Q&A that you can ask questions on. You can present what you're doing. You can ask questions of anyone's there, and they're all up on our YouTube channel. There are a number of SIGs, the ML, the Telco, the Ops one. There's a number of them that meet usually on Fridays, once a month. And the mailing lists, as I mentioned, are really pretty active these days. So really what we're trying to do is get as much content as we can that's reusable. It may not be corporate marketing. It's mostly technical stuff. As you can see from this one, it's Kafka, and then the talking has been done by Amadeus, which is a big user and a supporter of OpenShift. There's lots. I think there's about almost 180 briefings up on the YouTube channel. You can find all of these events on the commons.openshift.org events calendar, and it's pretty active. Right now it's a little blank in January because I'm doing a lot of traveling, but there's a lot of openings and I'll be hitting on everybody to talk. So you might think with all of that talk about peer-to-peer and it's not all about code contribution that this doesn't happen. But really, about 5 years ago, there were only 5 external to Red Hat companies contributing to OpenShift when we were just a platform as a service on Ruby on Rails. And we've grown in the past 2 years with this new model to having over 70 of you contributing back into the project, which is really pretty phenomenal for a typical Red Hat a project, especially one that's pretty directed by Red Hat, doesn't often have a lot. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One is a lot of the customers aren't allowed to contribute. And Duncan Lowy, I'm not sure if he's in the room yet, but he's going to talk a little bit, the gentleman from Credit Suisse, about how to enable your company to enable you to contribute to OpenShift, to open source and OpenShift, hopefully, and some of the work that you have to do, especially if you're in a financial company, to get that, to make that happen. But we're really happy to help get you on board with open source contribution and coach and do whatever you need. Excuse me. As we evolve to being a more Kubernetes-centric offering, we've been very heavily at Red Hat contributing and collaborating on Kubernetes. And if you go to any of the Kubernetes SIGs, you'll often see a Red Hatter co-leading or chairing many of the SIGs in there. There's a differentiation between the SIGs and the OpenShift Commons to Kubernetes. The Kubernetes SIGs is where the technical work is done, and in the OpenShift Commons, it's more about sharing best practices and lessons learned. So there's a little distinction there. I think it's a good one. We've been doing some really interesting cross-community collaboration analysis with a company called Bitergia that does all of our GitHub contribution stuff. And we've been really looking at where the relationships are between the two projects, which has made some very pretty pictures, but it's also, you can see where there's Red Hatters, the larger sort of backwards jellyfish, and the lower one, the larger one is Kubernetes, and the lower one is us, and you can see the number of people that are Red Hatters that are contributing. And then as it spreads out, we can see the dots are the number of non-Red Hatters that are working in both projects. And then these are all of the developers that are working from everywhere that are working on it. But this is the really interesting one, and I did a deeper dive on this topic, explaining some of the personas in here at DevConf last week, and I'll share that link with her. But the really interesting thing to me is all of these different colors are all of the different organizations that are working on both of our projects. It really signifies those 70 companies that are really collaborating in both spaces. So it's been a very interesting transition from being a sort of a standalone, not collaborating with larger open source projects as much, to working in the Kubernetes space. So it requires a lot of communication on releases and release cycles and all kinds of interesting aspects of it. So this has been really the very interesting exponential growth in the interest in Kubernetes and the folks that are contributing into OpenShift. And really, that was just Kubernetes and OpenShift. If you look at all of the other projects that we use, especially things like OpenTracing and Jaeger and Containerd and lots of things that we use that are under the CNCF umbrella, you'll understand how those relationships all expand and connect. It's very gratifying to see where things are going. The training that's going on in the other room right now is on this new thing called the Operator Framework. How many of you have heard of the Operator Framework? Yes, my work is being heard. This is good. I really love this. So the Operator Framework is then going to take that again and expand this whole bunch of connections to a whole lot of other projects too. So we're just going to see more and more of the need for this peer-to-peer, face-to-face communication channels being built up. And so we're hoping that you'll really work with your peers, work with us, let us help you connect with each other. And in some ways, OpenShift Commons represents Red Hat stepping back and letting people connect directly to each other via the OpenShift Commons. So if you haven't joined OpenShift Commons yet, please do so. I'll be around the whole day in the evening into the reception, and I can set you up. I want to give a big shout out in advance, and you'll hear me shout out. I'm completely grateful to all of the sponsors for this, because this is a community event, and this is a very schwanky space for us to be in as community folks. So please do. The lunch will be served on both ends, so don't just all aggregate down to one end. Go to both ends. The breaks are there. Meet with everybody, because they're doing us all a very big favor getting us here today, and you're doing us a very big favor coming here today, so I'm really grateful for that. So welcome to the OpenShift universe. I'm going to bring on Brian Gracely, who is right here in the wings, and we're going to set him up for our first keynote, and then we'll go right into the next couple. And please welcome Brian Gracely.